Democrat Gwen Combs formally announced her campaign with a rally earlier this week that she is entering the Arkansas 2nd District Congressional race. We are glad to have her with us. She's a veteran, she's a mom, she's a teacher. You got all those things under your resume. Welcome to the program. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much.
You've been in this race since last summer, really, so
Right.
Tell me what it's been like out there on the campaign trail.
It's interesting talking to people. I've had a lot of experiences around the district and getting to know the voters out there. It's been great.
Yeah, tell me what has motivated you to get into the race this time around. I know you got particularly, and you've been an observer for a long time from your teaching position, but you really got interested late last year during the presidential election.
Right. My teaching career has been my inspiration to get involved and to advocate for my students. Back during the election, they had some really strong, terrifying fears that I wanted to help address. And through the process of that, I organized the Women's March led the organization of the Women's March for Arkansas back in January, and got involved with some advocacy organizations, both around the state and around the nation.
Tax reform, it has been front and center. You've got the GOP House plan, you've got the GOP Senate plan, they're in conference. You've been very critical of a lot of the different things that they're trying to push through there. What would you like to see? If you were up in Congress right now, what would you be advocating for in terms of tax reform?
I would like to see tax reform that puts everyday Arkansans first. Right now, if you look at the implementation over the first 5 years, people under $75,000, families under $75,000 in income a year are going to lose over those first 5 years, whereas those above that line are going to win. The tax cuts that happen are going to have a greater impact, a greater positive impact the higher the income is, and that's just, it doesn't make sense for Arkansas families.
On health care, another big issue that Congress has been debating off and on this whole year. Again, you've had some strong opinions on this too. Do you want to see fixes done to the Affordable Care Act? Do you want to see a single payer system put in place? What would you advocate?
Ultimately, I would like to see a single payer system. I would like to see Medicare for all, including provisions for long-term support services and home and community-based services that will accommodate our people with disabilities. We don't need to leave anyone out when it comes to that. But I think that being realistic, we need to look at the fact that there need to be steps that are taken along the way. I've got 4 criteria that I would like to see met in doing that. That includes ensuring more people, making sure that the costs are lowered for everybody, the out-of-pocket costs, retaining Medicaid and Medicaid expansion, and allowing for coverage that is equal to Congress or better for all Arkansans and all Americans, regardless of age, income, gender, and pre-existing conditions.
Speaking of gender, we have had some pretty high-profile conversations for the last several weeks, last several months at the national level as well as locally about sexual harassment, sexual misconduct. This has really been part of a national dialogue and a national movement. It's easy, you and I were talking before we started rolling tape here, it's easy to kind of quantify your tax plan, it's easy to quantify your health care plan. Difficult to quantify a plan for dealing with sexual harassment and sexual misconduct. Where should this conversation that we're having take us?
I agree with you that it is difficult to quantify it. I believe it really boils down to a power differential. And if we look at it that way, it is a little bit easier to quantify it. Currently, we have 20% representation of women in Congress. And at the state level, that is about 18%. So if we just look from that level down, the power differential is highly favored toward men. And that puts women at a disadvantage. That makes us more vulnerable. Now, we can't talk about this harassment in just terms of men versus women, because women of color particularly are much more vulnerable in situations. And when we look at the fact that children are even more vulnerable yet, there's a place that we can definitely draw a line. There are quantifiable issues that we can look at that will help us measure where we go with this.
But you're advocating more diversity in our representation is going to lead to some stronger outcomes in this space, is what you're saying, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that if we balance that power, then we eliminate the possibilities for it to be people to be victimized.
All right, you got a slightly crowded primary. Paul Spencer is also running in this race. You both want the opportunity to take on incumbent Republican Congressman French Hill. You've seen Paul out on the campaign trail some, I guess.
Right.
You guys have a pretty amicable back and forth. You think that's going to be a pretty spirited campaign there?
We both recognize that whoever comes out of this primary on top is going to need the support of one another. So we have been amicable, we've spoken to one another, and we recognize that ultimately it's about winning that general election next November.
Maybe more people get in the race too before it's all said and done.
Yeah.
The more the merrier?
Well,
Not necessarily. All right. Gwen Combs, she's a Democrat running for Congress. You can find her stuff online if you want to. We hope to have you back.
Thank you.
All right. We're back with more right after this word from our sponsors. Paul Gatling joins us from Northwest Arkansas to talk about Razorback Football Incorporated. Stick around.